Good evening, I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. The domestic turmoil in Washington waits for more voting and more information. You know the scale of the contest. On one side of the chessboard is the Republican House, and the other side of the chessboard is the Democratic Senate, with the important distinction that the president is the king, and he sits very carefully with the Democratic Senate. The most recent news out of Washington, not profound, is that the House has voted again, this time 228 to 201, to delay the individual mandate for a year. And also, well, I don't know, check that, maybe just delay it. And also to revoke the health insurance subsidies provided for staffers on the Hill. That's known as the nuclear option. I'll discuss this through the evening. Later on tonight, I'll speak to a member of the leadership in the House of Representatives from California. However, I turn to the war fighting now because while they're throwing food in Washington, they're throwing lead in the Ummah, the Islamic community. And over these last days and weeks and months and years, it has been apparent to those of us who follow this story very carefully, and I'm joined by two of the chroniclers of Long War Journal, Tom Joscelyn and Bill Roggio, the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, that the Long War Journal has kept score of a massive battle space in many theaters, but they're describing one large story, which is al-Qaeda's success to recruit, to train, to arm, to fund, and to maneuver against a number of national armies and against the transnational combat abilities of the United States and its allies. I begin with Bill because there's an article in The Economist, it's not signed, but in any event, in The Economist magazine of London, a very dry and authoritative assessment of the world as we live it, that states just those facts, al-Qaeda rising, that the White House and the claims of the president's re-election campaign some year past that al-Qaeda was on the road to defeat, does not describe either generally or specifically the facts that we can see in this battle space from the Atlantic to the Hindu Kush. Bill, I start with you, because when I saw the Economist piece, I sent it right to you, and your response was important. Did it surprise you that all of a sudden the very much status quo anti-reporting in London has come to the position that you and Tom have developed in detail for so long, that al-Qaeda is not only back, it's robust and it's aggressive, and its ability to fight in many theaters at the same time is impressive? Good evening, Bill.
Good evening, John. It is both surprising and not surprising. First, the not surprising part. The reason is when you look at what's happened over the past several months, when you look at the rise of al-Qaeda in Syria, North Africa, and Egypt, in what happened in Kenya with the plot that emanated from Yemen with al-Qaeda's general manager being based there, you can't look at al-Qaeda any longer and say, you have to come to the conclusion that this is not a defeated organization, and in fact, U.S. policy has failed. It is somewhat surprising that they're finally saying, and what is kind of surprising is what they're saying is al-Qaeda is rejuvenated, and that just isn't the case. As Tom and I have documented over the years, al-Qaeda has been on this upward glide since the death of bin Laden. I think that, the death of bin Laden personally and other top leaders is a setback for the organization from a leadership standpoint, but it hasn't affected them tactically on the ground. They may lose ground in Yemen and they may lose ground in Somalia. They may lose, they may have tactical losses. But when you look at what al-Qaeda has become since 9/11, what they've done is expand their operations, expand the number of jihadists that are fighting and expanded the theaters as well. And you can't come to any conclusion. So, again, surprising but not so surprising. We've been saying this all along, John, both at the Long War Journal and on your show.
Tom, I come to you specifically on Shabab's attack at Kenya. So far, the alleged Shabab attack. We wait for confirmation from the investigation underway. The Westgate Mall, the massacre of innocents, the offensive ability of al-Qaeda to coordinate the Shabab attack, if that is the case. the reason I ask, Bill, is that the concern here by all Western governments is watching Al-Qaeda doing very well in East Africa or in North Africa or in the Arabian Peninsula. Does that say that Al-Qaeda's capabilities are transnational, that they can strike against Europe or against the American homeland? Good evening, Tom.
Good evening, John. Well, I think that is the case. I mean, the bottom line is that all these affiliates at one time or another has conceived plots against the West. It's not just that they're fighting overseas in Africa or the heart of the Middle East, but they all, at one time or another, conceive some plots against the West, and they devote some small portion of the resources to that. Basically, the argument that Bill and I have been making over and over again is that as they've expanded their presence, as Al-Qaeda and its affiliates have expanded their presence in these insurgencies and this war fighting around the globe, that necessarily increases the risk to us, because what happens is it basically gives them multiple platforms from which they can strike out and reach the West. So what you find with counterterrorism officials, intelligence officials who track this closely, who are not sort of, politicos, is there is a great concern that, in fact, this spreading of these insurgencies around the globe and their war fighting has allowed them to basically increase their platform for hitting the West.
The Nairobi attack. Tom, you flag in your article at Long War Journal that this was a new and complex operation. Is that a way of suggesting that this operation can travel to Minnesota or this operation can travel to Los Angeles?
Well, I think that they've been experimenting with new types of operations for a while. I think this goes back several years, actually, where they were looking to do something like this. I mean, remember, back in 2010, Al-Qaeda had conceived a plot that was modeled after the Mumbai attacks in 2008. They wanted to carry out the same thing in Europe, and that basically U.S. officials and Western intelligence officials had shut down that plot by figuring out what was going on and basically killing or capturing some of the operatives involved. So I think this has been something they've been working on for a while, something they've been trying to duplicate around the globe in all these different areas.
And duplicate how, Tom? What is striking to you about the Nairobi attack? What elements there make Al-Qaeda more threatening?
Well, you see, they're evolving. What happened was basically back in July, the UN actually warned that Shabaab's ally in Kenya, this group called Al-Hijra, was planning new and more complex operations in Kenya. And what we see with the attack on the Westgate Mall is this is sort of, as Bill pointed out, a Mumbai-style attack, where Mumbai was these armed gunmen who go in and basically lay siege to a popular tourist venue or something along those sorts. And what it does is it basically maximizes the terrorism aspect of the operation. It maximizes the psychological aspect of the operation and allows them to sort of hit these soft targets and also maximize the casualties. And this is the sort of thing, it's different if you think about it than suicide bombings against an embassy or hitting hard targets or hitting military targets. This is sort of more of hitting the soft underbelly of these Western tourist locations around the globe.
Bill, we're going to go to Syria in a moment, but your thoughts about Nairobi. There is incomplete information. It's good, but it's not confirmed in the way that we need forensics and CSI, that there were nationals involved in the Nairobi attack that were not Somalis, and that some of the nationals were European or appeared to be European or people who could pass for European. Is that a significant development for Al-Qaeda? Why would they need such a thing, Bill?
If it's true, it would be significant in the sense that they're showing yet again that they are capable of recruiting in Western countries. Look, we know that Shabaab has recruited Westerners, and there's been several, at least 3 or 4 Americans who served as suicide bombers in Somalia. So it's not unheard of for Americans, and at least 50 to 100 Americans are thought to have fought in or currently are fighting in Somalia. They like that because it's a jab into the West, as well as it's showing that it's capable of recruiting here and possibly conducting operations here, because that Western passport is something that is desired by Al-Qaeda. It allows them to get through and get back to the homeland.
Emphasize that, Bill. What does that mean, having a passport, an American passport? What capability does that give Al-Qaeda?
Well, it allows the American to return home. So in the case of an American may go, say, to Egypt and then slip across the, and go in a roundabout way, wind up in Somalia, probably won't have his passport stamped on the way in, and then he get trained, get recruited, trained by Al-Qaeda, and then come home and possibly either recruit to send more fighters back to Somalia or possibly execute attacks here in the West. I know that there's U.S. officials, that is the fear, and particularly with Shabab, they believe that if there's going to be another attack, the possibility of Shabab fighters actually executing it is pretty high.
Tom, just a moment before we go to Syria. Do you agree with that the concern here is that this operation in Kenya could be evidence that al-Qaeda is gathering transnationals who can penetrate U.S. or European defenses?
Well, certainly, I think Shabab has long tried or long conceived of plots to hit the West. One of the things, a top Shabab official who was killed in 2011, named Haroon Fazal, was found with documents in his possession conceiving of plots against London, for example. And last year, during the Olympics, there was a security certificate put out for a Shabab-trained extremist. Basically, the London officials were worried that this guy was possibly thinking of attacking the Olympics there. So there's long been this sort of threat against the West coming out of Shabab. It's a small part of the resources, but it is something that they're always looking to do.
Tom Joscelyn and Bill Roggio, the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. When we come back, the Free Syrian Army units that have gone over to the Nusra Front or al-Qaeda in Iraq and the Levant. What is the significance of Free Syrian Army brigades traveling over to the dark side in the Syrian civil war? I'm John Batchelor.